The mother fights for the right to raise her daughter, but the grandmother is convinced that the child will be safer with her. An 11-year-old girl finds herself between two worlds, a new family with strict rules and strict discipline, and a place where she feels loved. The court reveals shocking details of the child's life, forcing the question, what is more important, family ties or the child's well-being? A verdict that will change their destinies forever. Chapter 1. The beginning of the case. The courtroom in downtown Boston is packed with people. Only the restrained voices of lawyers and muffled footsteps on the marble floor break the silence. Judge Elliot Graves flips through the documents on his desk, checking the information. His gaze runs over the pages of the file, which reads, #2025-0478 Victoria Johnson custody case. A few minutes before the start of the meeting, two women are sitting on opposite sides of the hall. One of them is Sarah Williams, a tall blonde dressed in a discreet beige suit, wringing her hands nervously. She looks around all the time, as if looking for someone in the crowd. The other is Ann Carter, an elderly woman with gray curls, holding a black bag in her hands, from which a neatly folded piece of paper can be seen. Her face is calm, but her eyes are closely following Sarah's movements. Suddenly, the bailiff's voice is heard in the hall. "Get up!" Judge Graves enters the courtroom. The judge, a stately man in a dark robe, enters his seat and takes a chair. His face expresses seriousness. He looks around the hall and says sternly, "We are considering the case of custody of minor Victoria Johnson. The plaintiff is the child's mother, Mrs. Sarah Williams. The defendant is the grandmother, Mrs. Ann Carter. Let's get started." Sarah takes a deep breath, her fingers shaking as she picks up a pen and jots something down on the paper. Her lawyer, Jonathan Bailey, quietly whispers, "The main thing is not to panic. Speak the truth." Ann Carter keeps her eyes on the judge, her attorney, Mrs. Ruth Simmons, calmly holding a file folder in front of her. Judge Graves looks at the case file again. The materials indicate that Victoria Johnson, 11 years old, left her mother's home twice and sought refuge with her grandmother. The plaintiff claims that the defendant is illegally keeping the child. At the same time, the defendant claims that the child came to her voluntarily. We have to figure out where it is best for Victoria. We are listening to the plaintiff's side. Mrs. Williams, I speak to you. Sarah stands up, her heart pounding in her chest. She catches Ann Carter's look, which seems like a challenge to her, and steps forward, preparing to tell her story. Chapter 2. Testimony of the Mother. Sarah Williams felt a lump rise to her throat. She straightened up, wringing her hands in an attempt to calm herself. Anything she says now could determine her future and her daughter's future. She looked at the judge, who was watching her carefully, and took a deep breath. "Your Honor," she began, trying to keep her voice even, "I love my daughter more than anything in the world. After the death of my first husband, I spent a long time trying to cope with the pain and give Victoria the best life possible. I worked, took care of her, but then I met Max. He became a support for me, helped me feel alive again." Judge Graves nodded, gesturing for her to continue. "Max didn't just accept me, he also wanted to accept Victoria." Sarah turned her gaze to the child's grandmother, who was sitting across from her. "We got married, moved into his house, and I gave birth to another child. I wanted to give Victoria a complete family where there would be order, care, and stability." Ann Carter's attorney, Ruth Simmons, rose. "Did you know that your daughter ran away to her grandmother twice? Why do you think she did this?" Sarah looked down, her lips pursed. "Vika is attached to her grandmother because after the death of her father, we lived together. I do not deny this, but she is a child, and children often idealize those who allow them to do something. Our family has rules and discipline. She must learn to live in the real world." Ruth Simmons crossed her arms over her chest. "Do you think that the grandmother indulges the child? She does not set any boundaries. Vika should feel responsible and not just run to someone who allows her everything when she doesn't like something." The judge intervened. "Mrs. Williams, do you have proof that your daughter is indeed under the negative influence of Mrs. Carter?" Sarah clasped her hands, leaned forward a little. Vika began to manipulate me. She told her grandmother that she was sick instead of solving problems at home. When she ran away the second time, I didn't know where she was. It was a horror. I called hospitals, even the morgue, and then it turned out that she was at her grandmother's, and Anne didn't even tell me about it right away. This is a kidnapping. Ann Carter just shook her head, but didn't say a word. Judge Graves looked at the grandmother's lawyer. Mrs. Simmons, do you have any questions? Yes, Your Honor, but I would like to hear another side of the matter first. The judge nodded and turned to Ann Carter. Mrs. Carter, you have the floor. Chapter 3. Protection of the Grandmother. Ann Carter rose slowly but with dignity. Her eyes remained calm, even though the room was tense. She adjusted her light jacket, sighed, and looked straight at the judge. Your Honor, I did not kidnap Victoria. Her voice was even, but deep emotion sounded in it. She came to me alone, twice, and twice I took her in because she was scared, confused, and unhappy. Sarah Williams clasped her hands tightly again, but said nothing. Judge Graves nodded. Please explain why, in your opinion, the child left his home. Because she doesn't feel loved there, Anne answered, looking at Sarah. I do not deny that my daughter-in-law loves her daughter, but her love has moved away, absorbed by a new marriage, a new family. Vika stayed away. Sarah's lawyer, Jonathan Bailey, intervened sharply. These are just your guesses, Mrs. Carter. Do you have concrete evidence that the child is suffering in the mother's home? Anne smiled faintly. Your Honor, allow me to present the conclusion of the psychological examination. She took out the documents from her bag and handed them to the bailiff. According to experts' assessment, Victoria is in a state of emotional stress due to her stepfather's strict discipline. She feels isolated, unwanted, abandoned. The judge carefully examined the papers, nodding. The conclusion states that the child repeatedly complained about punishment for minor offenses. A psychologist claims that her environment has a negative effect on her mental health. That's right, Your Honor, Anne confirmed calmly. Vika does not have the opportunity to have friends. There is no support. She is afraid to make a mistake because for every mistake she is punished. She came to me in tears because she was forced to call Max Dad, even though she didn't want to. This is not true, Sarah interrupted loudly. Max just wants her to feel like part of the family, and did not turn away from the judge. She doesn't want to be a part of this family if it means forgetting who she is. The judge tapped his pen on the table, calming passions, then asked, Mrs. Carter, what do you think is best for the child? Anne held her breath for a moment. To stay where she is loved as she is, where her voice counts, where she is not afraid to be herself. Chapter 4. Testimony of the child. The courtroom froze. Judge Graves glanced at the door leading to the private witness room. Summon Victoria Johnson. His voice was calm, but full of the weight of the moment. The door opened, and Victoria entered the hall. She was 11, but at this moment she looked older. Her back was tense, her eyes full of anxiety. She clutched the sleeves of her light sweater tightly, and her eyes darted between her mother and grandmother. Come, Victoria, the judge smiled gently, trying to calm the girl down. I know that it is difficult for you, but you are here to help us understand how you are doing. Vika nodded and sat down in the witness seat. She was silent for a few seconds before the judge asked the first question. Where is it more comfortable for you to live, with your mother or with your grandmother? The girl pressed her hands to her knees and hesitantly looked around. She looked at her mother, who sat tense, ready for an answer, and then looked at her grandmother, who kept a calm expression on her face. With grandmother, Vika said almost in a whisper. An oppressive silence reigned in the hall. Sarah gripped the arms of the chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. The judge calmly asked, Why, Victoria, can you explain your feelings? The girl took a deep breath, as if gaining courage. When I live with my mother and Uncle Max, I'm always afraid of doing something wrong. He is very strict. He says it should be that discipline is important, but I'm afraid of him. Sometimes he punishes me for little things. For what, for example? The judge asked softly. Once I did not iron my school uniform, and I was not allowed to go out for a month. And when I brought the kitten home, he threw it out on the street, said it was dirty. Victoria's voice trembled. And how is your mother? Does she support you? Ann Carter's attorney, Ruth Simmons, interjected. The girl looked at her mother. She doesn't listen to me. Whenever I try to talk to her, she's always busy with Archie or Uncle Max. I know she loves me, but I don't think she needs me anymore. Judge Graves cocked his head to the side, considering the child's response. At that moment, it became clear. The decision he would make would change this girl's life forever. Chapter 5. Verdict. The courtroom froze in anticipation. After Victoria's testimony, everyone understood that the decision would not be easy, but final. Judge Elliot Graves flipped through the documents, his face impenetrable as he considered what he had heard. Sarah Williams sat with a tense back, her fingers running across the table, tapping out a nervous rhythm. Ann Carter, on the other hand, remained calm, although her eyes showed anxiety. Vika looked down, clutching her hands as if she was afraid to look at anyone in this hall. The court has considered all the evidence. The judge finally spoke. His voice was clear and even. We heard the testimony of the mother, grandmother, and the child herself. In this case, the decisive factor is not only the mother's legal right to custody, but also the best interests of the child. Sarah clenched her jaw, staring intently at the judge. She already knew what she was about to hear. Victoria Johnson clearly expressed her position. She does not feel comfortable in the house of her mother and her new husband. The conclusions of the psychological examination confirm that the strict rules and discipline of the stepfather cause emotional stress in the child. In this case, the welfare of the child must be guided, and not only the rights of the parents. The judge paused, looked around the room, and said, "The court orders that Victoria Johnson be placed in the custody of her grandmother, Mrs. Ann Carter." There was silence. Sarah let out a sharp breath, her face contorted in pain. "But, Your Honor," her voice broke. The judge looked at her, giving her the opportunity to speak. "I wanted to give Victoria a complete family. I wanted her to have a father, a brother, to grow up in a stable home." Sarah wiped away the tears that came to her eyes. "And now what? Did I lose her?" "No, Mrs. Williams," answered the judge calmly. "You have the right to regular meetings and communication. This does not mean that you are not a mother, but it does mean that, for now, it is better for the child to stay where he feels safe." Ann Carter squeezed Victoria's hand, and she held it tight. The judge struck with the gavel. "The meeting is over." Sarah sat in silence, as if she was still trying to comprehend what had just happened. Her family has fallen apart, and now she will have to rebuild her relationship with her daughter, not as a mother who rules her life, but as a woman who once made the wrong choice. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing.